Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello, and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker, and I'm your host. And we're always looking to find new angles and new ways for you to work smarter, not harder, right? And I think a lot of people today are just bogged down, overwhelmed, feeling burnout. And so today's going to be an apropos discussion to talk about how we can use technology so that we can be more effective in our time management and take back time. I'm excited to have Ken Babcock with us today. He is co-founder and CEO at Tango, and Tango allows users to create beautiful step-by-step tutorials of any digital process without the performance art of video recordings, all those fancy things that you have to spend lots of times preparing. Ken, along with his co-founder, Brian Schultz and Dan Giovacchini, dropped out of Harvard Business School during the pandemic to start this company. And since then, the company's grown to nearly 50,000 users and 20 full-time team members. And without further ado, we're going to invite Ken to join us today. Hi, Ken.
Hey, Penny, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you gave up a Harvard education for this job. You're worth it.
Yeah, so far, so good. It's funny. I think I sent that to you a couple months ago when we first connected. We're now over 350,000 users, almost 40 team members. So Tango's been growing.
That's incredible. That's in about a year, right? I remember when we were first in touch and we were going to have this interview, it was about a year ago.
Yeah. So it was about a year ago. So the growth that we've seen has been tremendous. I think, not to get too much into the product, but just the transition of how people work and how they're embracing remote work and hybrid solutions, and what we're going to talk about today with emerging technologies just to make you more efficient. I think everybody's looking for that. There's a certain shift that happened in the pandemic where people started to get more ownership over their time. They don't have to go into the office. They don't have to clock in and clock out. They can work from home. And so people are saying, if no one's measuring those inputs of how much time I'm spending, I just need to produce on the outputs. Let me do that in the most efficient way possible. So that's kind of the trend that I think we've capitalized on. And it's really exciting to see, not just for our customers, but our internal team too.
Absolutely. Some of what you just said brought up some thoughts for me, right? So people are at home. They want to make more use of technology and better use of their time. But I believe also that being at home, right, has also created some overwhelm, that they're faced with even more tools than ever. Mm-hmm. And the companies, in an effect to work more efficiently, added more tools. So how do we find talking about embracing emerging technologies? Maybe it's also worth starting with, how do we know which ones? How do we reduce the complexity? Because there's so many out there to help us to be more efficient. And in the end, it becomes a distraction.
Totally. And I mean, that's like a fundamental thesis that we have at Tango too. I mean, if you think about, just zoom out in the last 2 or 3 decades, it's got exponentially easier to build software and iterate on software. And so what you're seeing now, and this is true of just really, it'll be true of any day moving forward, we're at the peak of the number of tools that are used within an organization. There was a report, Okta, which is a software company, does this report on how many tools the average enterprise uses. They do it every year. Every year it's been going up. The average large enterprise uses 90 tools just to get work done, right? And they might be building a tool themselves, right? And so that distraction, and not a distraction, but the ramp up that's required to be able to utilize those to their full capacity is super, super high. So you talk about, I'm going to join a company. I have to ramp up on the company, its goals, what it stands for. I have to ramp up on my role, what my goals are, who my team is, what's expected of me. And then there's like this third sort of boogeyman that no one's really addressing right now, which is, how do I use all the tools in my tool belt to get to that point? I know about the goals, but if I need to use these things in order to do it, how do I use them?
Well, and often there's no rules, right, around which tools to use in which case. Like, so communication tools alone, most companies have like 5 to 10 communication tools,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's email, Skype, WhatsApp, Slack, right?
I mean, we're on Zoom right now. Like
exactly. Some of the people who are using the Microsoft environment, that's a whole host of communication tools. So there's no rules behind it either. So I think that's also a problem. So how does, and I know this isn't necessarily what we were starting out to talk about, and we'll come back to that, but as an individual, how do you navigate that? Even though I think there's a responsibility from the organization to reduce this complexity, how do you as an individual deal with all of this? What did you call it? The boogeyman.
Yeah, the boogeyman. I mean, and especially as it relates to communication, I think that's the one that is probably the least clarified of the rules. What we did internally, we're a remote company. We've been a remote company since we started, mainly because we started during the pandemic. So just this inertia of hiring people remotely distributed.
Sure.
And we acknowledged that like the hardest part of operating remotely was going to be communication. We took a ton of inspiration from a company called GitLab, GITLAB. They were a remote company well before it was popular. And they publicly share what they call their like remote manifesto. And it's really like, hey, if you're going to join this company, you're going to be part of us. You got to know how we work because it's unique, it's different, and we have norms that we've set up around communicating. And so we copied them in a lot of ways in setting up communication norms as a company. And
it was like rules. Are norms like rules?
They're rules. Without saying they're rules, they're rules.
Right. Norms. I like that better, right?
Yeah, norms. And so, I mean, it was something we came together as a team and agreed upon. I think some of the core ones that listeners can take away is being clear about what your schedule is. What are your working hours? When are you on? When are you off? When are you getting notifications? When are you not? I think another one too, like we use all types of different communication channels where we say default to public. And the idea there is like, if there's a public channel that you can have this conversation so other people can consume it and see what you're thinking, do that. The DMs is what creates these direct messages is what creates all these silos, and those get really hairy. So we say default to public, set your schedule. Another thing that's really hard is assuming positive intent. Studies have shown that, especially in remote work or when you're exchanging sort of more text-based communication, there is a negativity bias that exists. You assume someone means something if they don't. You read between the lines. You don't take something at face value. You assume there's something passive aggressive.
Right.
We just said, you know what? Even if that is the case, we all operate assuming positive content. And then the last one that I think is valuable is assuming low context. And what that means is that whenever you're communicating with someone, you basically say, you know what, I'm going to assume that I have more context than you, or I have a perspective that's different than yours. And so when we're sharing messages and updates, we're a little bit verbose, but the idea is that you're providing all the context that you have to somebody else who might not have it. So we've set, and there's more in there, but they get specific to the tooling. But basically what we said was, here are the guardrails, and like, this is what's going to help us operate better. Now, choosing when to use those tools is a whole different thing. And so we've had to kind of role model that ourselves as founders and leaders within the company. I go to my email inbox twice a day. That sounds crazy to a lot of people. Those emails build up, but I have 2 points in the day where I just focus on email so that I don't get distracted. I remove notifications on my mobile phone during the workday, during a set period of hours. There's a lot of things you can do so that it doesn't feel like you're constantly getting pulled into these tools, which frankly, they're designed to do. They're designed to pull you in.
We have to create these norms and boundaries for ourselves, because if they're not being set in the workplace, right, then it's on us to set them. And I think that looking back is that those boundaries used to be there, right? And over time, they've been eroding. And especially with us working from home, like you said, now it's up to us to manage our time a little bit more strictly. Then we have to put these into place so that we can really focus. Otherwise, we'll be everywhere all the time.
Yes. And it's easy to fall in that trap.
For sure. I do want to get to the piece about looking at those new technologies. So those are some great tips as to how to stay focused as an organization with having and setting those norms together. So love that. So we wanted to talk about also using emerging technologies as those resources to save us time. What's most important there for you that you want to share with the listeners about that topic? Because it's also a very big topic.
It's a big one. And the way I start thinking about it is, okay, if you're going to take an inventory of your day and you're going to say, okay, here's what I spend my time doing, break it out into certain buckets, look at the ROI. Typically what people come back with is, oh my gosh, I'm in too many meetings. And it makes it, honestly, remote, makes it so much easier to say, hey, we've got a Zoom room over here. Why don't you jump in and help us out? That can really take over a lot of the benefits of working remotely. It can take over your time. And so a few things that I think about from a meeting perspective, I'll talk a little bit about how we frame it as a company, but then also these emerging technologies that I think are really, really helpful in removing your meeting loads. We have this concept that we talk about, which is how expensive is that meeting? So we ask people to basically think about everyone that you're inviting and really think about, do I have the people in the room that I need to be able to make a decision and make sure that there's an outcome for every meeting. So that sort of reduces meetings at a high level where it's like, okay, well, I'm not just going to invite the whole team or just invite somebody because they want to be there. It's like, no, let's have the decision makers. Let's have the people that need to provide input on the decision. And so that's one. But then when we get to like the technology, what our team has embraced, and I think a lot of other teams have as well, but they're still not widespread enough, is tools like Loom that allows you. So Loom is a technology that allows you to record your screen, record your voiceover, share that out to a bunch of people. We've actually used that to replace certain meetings. So we might say, hey, you know what, guys, we're going to skip all hands this week. There's a lot going on. So instead, I'll just go ahead and record a Loom video of the updates that we are going to share. And that way it's just on me. It's just my time. It's not 40 people at the company that need to log into the same meeting. And so that's a big one. And then the other piece that we hear a lot is, as an early stage startup, we're constantly talking to customers. And a lot of folks on our team wish they could be a fly on the wall with every customer conversation, but that can quickly become overwhelming. And so we actually use call recording software that plugs directly into Zoom, which is where we have a lot of these customer conversations. And then people can go back and they can watch the highlights. They can watch the replays of those conversations. And you can actually, within some of these tools, parse out different points of the meeting where you say, oh, wow, that was a really good point. I just want to share that with somebody on the team. So
I have a tool called Fathom that I'm playing with that does that, right? It'll take the Zoom call and you'll highlight certain pieces. And so it'll create a minutes and all sorts of stuff. So it's
we love, and I'm sure there's a ton of good ones out there. We use Grain, which is a great
Grane or
Grain. They're awesome. They're early stage like us. So we've traded some learnings back and forth. They've rapidly improved their product too.
I want to include these tools for people who are listening because they may have never heard of them, right? Various different people at different stages of their understanding of which technologies can be of support to them. And like you said, that can really help to reduce down meetings so that you really only have the people that really need to be there, and anybody who just needs to be informed about certain things can get those minutes and those highlights afterwards.
Yes.
Much more effective.
Yep.
Awesome. What else you got?
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, there had to come a point where talk a little bit about Tango. So I think we serve as a complement to some of those tools. So with Tango, one thing that we heard early on when we were building this company is, oh man, it takes way too long creating documentation. And documentation tends to be that key artifact that actually helps a remote team or any team for that matter get up to speed and get the context that they need. But there's a huge barrier to doing it. And the biggest piece is around how long it takes. And we heard time and time again, oh my gosh, it takes hours to write these articles. Then they get stale really quickly. Then I have to maintain them. Then people are hitting me up.
You're talking about also like screenshots that people have to make, right? So like back in the old days, right? If you wanted to capture certain pieces. So yeah, and finding documents too, right? Is a major time.
It's a huge time suck. In fact, McKinsey had a study, I want to say it was maybe 2 years ago, but they basically identified that most knowledge workers spend 20% of their week. So that's a full day out of a work week looking for the right information. So all of those, like, you don't spend a whole day continuously, but these little paper cuts of like, I don't have the answer that I need. It's not at my fingertips. What do I do in this situation? That can become really draining and that can really take over your time. And so what we created is a tool that actually allows you to create that documentation in the flow of work. And what that means is we capture all those screenshots, the actions that you take, the URLs that you're on, and put that into a step-by-step tutorial in about 10 seconds. So once you're done with your process, we auto-generate that. You can do all your editing live in Tango, and that saves teams a ton of time creating standard operating procedures, best practices, FAQs, really, really valuable for process. And also educating people on all those tools that you're using internally, what we talked about in the beginning. So that's been driving a lot of like our adoption, is just that pain point around documentation.
Absolutely. And like you said, because there are so many tools, once you get those documented, it makes the whole onboarding much easier. Because I saw a statistic, I can't remember the exact statistics, but it was over, like I said, I don't remember the exact number, but I remember it being over 50% of people who had the onboarding was the decision maker as to whether they would be successful in the company, whether they developed a good feeling for it, whether they felt overwhelmed, and whether they would stay. So those that had a good onboarding stayed, and those that didn't, that left.
Yes.
So
I know that exact stat that you're talking about.
Do you have it at the fingertips?
I do. For those people who identify it as having a good or great onboarding process, they're 88% more likely to be at the company within 2 years. So at that 2 year, the likelihood that they'll be there is significantly higher. And I do think a lot
Huge,
of
right? That's way more than 50%.
Oh my God. And when you talk about the cost of recruiting, the cost of opening a new role, the cost of then getting a new person up to speed, there's a lot of value in that. And unfortunately, companies traditionally underinvest in onboarding. They think, well, we hired the right person. They're going to come in and figure it out. But there's just so much context that needs to be soaked up.
And you know what I'd say there is, I would say it's not only that they underinvest, they focus on the wrong things, right? And that's one of my areas of just highlighting to people, is that we just are focused on the wrong things. We don't have the right lens. And so therefore, we invest in the wrong things. And it's not that they're totally wrong, but they're not the most priority. They're not the things that get the greatest impact. And so, unfortunately,
absolutely. Well, that's where tooling falls by the wayside. There's so many other things that get put up on a pedestal, and especially in the onboarding process, as like a virtue. Like, oh, of course we need to talk about this. Or of course, like someone needs to be trained up on X, Y, Z. And those things are important, but you're hiring somebody to excuse my language, get done. Right. And so if the biggest blocker to them getting stuff done is tooling, like you're probably not spending enough time on that. So yeah, I fully agree with you. I think there's a lot of good intention. There's probably not a lot of good like outcomes in onboarding.
Yeah. Good intentions don't always translate into the right focus and the right outcomes.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just curious, I ask most guests this question: how do you define productivity and why?
Yes, it's a good question. I'm the founder and CEO of a productivity tool. I think for us, I've always focused on a quote that I love, which is, don't mistake activity with achievement. I think in the modern workplace, there can be this checklist mentality of, oh, I got all these things done today, but are they the right things? And so we always stress to our team, it's not the inputs, it's the outputs. But what that means is we need to be very clear about what our goals are, set goals that are ambitious. Those are the outputs, right? And so if we're hitting those goals, I don't care if you log in twice a week for 30 minutes at a time. Like if we're hitting those goals, great. And so it's a sort of a shift in focus that a lot of people are struggling to remove because they're so used to work is 9 to 5. We go into an office, we do these things, and I fill my time with stuff that feels productive, but probably isn't. And so I acknowledge that you can say, oh, outputs are more important. Achievement is more important than activity, but you do have to, as a company, have the infrastructure to be able to measure it. So that's where we've invested a lot of time on our OKR process, objectives and key results. That's where we've invested a lot of time in our data infrastructure and our ability to measure things such that we can say, as a company, we're output oriented. We're not input oriented. Inputs tend to be a crutch for people that don't have that output infrastructure in place.
That's a great point. I agree with that.
That's how I define productivity.
Taking notes on that. Long definition, but I get it. So last question, and then we'll find out where people can go to find out more about you and Tango. I'm writing a new book and it's around reset moments and how we can be more aligned with our actions and our intentions so that we can be more output focused. And so I'm just curious, what are some of your reset practices that help you stay focused on what's most important?
Yes, I picked this one up from a coach who I use who's awesome. I think it's one of the most valuable exercises I do every day, which is I look at my calendar, which is busy because I'm meeting externally, internally, and every single planned interaction I have with somebody, and I try to articulate in one word or two words how I want to show up in that moment. And so whether that's, hey, I need to deliver like a stern message, or I need to pump somebody up, motivate them, or, hey, I need to really like sell here. So I think where that helps me, it's not clearly maybe priorities, but it helps me actually like measure my energy throughout the day and understand, oh, I really need to like, here's one where I need to show up in this way. And then if I don't show up in that way, it's a reflective process where I say, okay, well, why did that happen? Was I being pulled in too many different directions? Did I feel like it wasn't worth my time? And so that's the practice that I would encourage folks to embrace.
I love that. It's almost like setting an intention, but it's setting an intention for your way of being, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you need to be supportive, you're going to be clear before you go into that meeting that you're going to come from a supportive lens, and that's how you're going to show up, right? Or if you need to be directive, then you're going to be directive, right? And because I'm saying this so that everybody listening understands that each one of those, by deciding how you're going to show up in your state of being, is going to determine your behavior, the words that you use, the actions that you take, and all that. So that's significant. It may seem like it's not significant. So I want to make sure that people understand the significance of that reset before each and every interaction that you take. So my question to you is, how do you reflect? Do you have a planned reflection at the end of the day to then, you said in the beginning of the day, you'll look and make that clarity. At the end of the day, do you go back and look at that and say, okay, now let me look at how I showed up in each one?
Exactly. So, I mean, I have it already written down, right? And so when my last meeting's over, I kind of take a look at that and I say, okay, did I do this? Why or why not? And the reason this is so relevant to priorities, you gave the example of, oh, I need to be directive. Sometimes in order to do that, you need to do some homework, right? Or you need to pull some data, or you need to reference some materials, right? And so understanding where those gaps are, oh, hey, I want to show up in this way, but I'm not equipped to do it right now. That's how it helps with priorities. And then sometimes you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh man, I wasn't able to show up in that way because I didn't prioritize what I needed to do to be effective in that way.
Sure, absolutely. And it could be some research, but it could also just be preparing a few questions that you feel are going to be most relevant. And we're more effective and show up the way we want when we spend just a little bit of time in that preparation, right? That forethought, because that person could say something that triggers something in you. And then all of a sudden you're forgetting that you needed to ask these questions and show up in a certain way.
Exactly.
Love that. Love that. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to share with the listeners today?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. So in the spirit of efficiency, I'll stop there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, tell us how we can get a hold of you, and then we'll close down the show.
Yeah. Best place would be to go to tango.us. There you can learn more about what we're doing as a company, find our open roles, find me. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot me a note at ken@tango.us. I check email twice a day, like I said. So I'm on top of it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here, Ken.
Thanks, Penny.
And thank you all for being here. You were blessed with a lot of big nuggets from this show. You learned a little bit on how to deal with your boundaries, creating some norms for yourself and for your teams. You learned a little bit about how you can use Tango and some other technologies to help you to be more efficient and effective. And then you learned a really powerful reset moment that you can do that is going to make a difference in how you show up to every scheduled meeting. So listen to it again if you need to. Put this into practice. Let me know. Subscribe and make sure that you're keeping us up to date with the topics that you want to hear about. Thank you so much. My name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.